I don't know how you guys feel about this, but I want to thank Spilling Ink for all their support the last couple of months because you brought on numerous writers of mine. I've been on your show twice now, and I really just want to be an advocate for your show. So I want to create a veg to thank you guys for that.
Oh, wow. That would be amazing. Yeah, I'm completely on board with that. Thank you.
Katie?
Yeah, you've introduced us to a lot of really cool writers.
So when you introduce me, I just want to give you guys a quick shout out before we get started, just because you've been so good about everything. So,
well, thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
I've said it before. My favorite part of the week is talking to authors each week. I like getting to know all the new people out there, seeing what's available, seeing what they're learning, what's working for them. So it's fun. This is what I look forward to each week.
Excellent. I mean, it's a partnership, right? And that's how I view it. And hopefully you guys do too. And I just want to really broadcast that because as Sarah knows, I'm all about collaboration and partnerships, and that's how I built my business.
That's what does it.
Sorry, I'm only not talking because of the dogs.
No, it's okay. I'd like to do that if that's okay before, when you introduce.
Most definitely. I really do appreciate that. That's awesome.
Okay, so we'll do that.
All right, so you guys ready? I'll go ahead and do our intro in. And Mickey, did you want to talk first or did you want Sarah to talk first?
We'll let the star talk first because she's focused.
All right, so Sarah, you'll get the nod first.
Sure.
And then we'll go over to Mickey after that. All right, welcome to another episode of Spilling Ink, the talk show that takes you behind the book to meet the authors and professionals in the indie publishing industry. We're back again with another author to introduce you to, and you might remember our publicist, Mickey. He's back to talk to us again this week. And we've got David back. We missed you last week, David.
Hi. Sorry, the dogs are barking, so I got to be quiet. Mute myself so that I'm hearing dogs. But I'm
going to bring my cat to your house, David, just for these episodes specifically.
Yes, let's do it. We'll have an animal Royal Rumble.
Oh, no. Can I bring Bowser?
Yeah, do it.
He's huge now, by the way. He is a fat cat.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, you remember when he was just a little itty-bitty puffball? Yeah, no, he's huge.
He's trying to know his name.
He is. He's vicious, too. He attacks my older cat.
Yeah, he's Bowser. What'd you expect?
I know. You give him a villain's name, he's going to be a villain.
There you go.
But anyways, we missed you last week. We had an excellent show with some authors that were doing some co-writing.
Oh, that is so cool. And I gotta go back and look at it because that's something that I'm actually discussing with one of my friends. So it's like where you work on the same book together, right? Like
right, yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I got going on.
I'll definitely check that episode out. It's an interesting process, and everybody's done it a little bit differently. You've got to figure out how you mesh with the other author you're working with.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm working on. That's crazy. Good timing.
All right. Well, before we end up taking over the whole show, let's introduce Sarah. She's our author this week. Sarah, go ahead and tell us about you and your books.
Hi. So right now, I just have one book out. It's a short story collection of dark literary fiction with some fantasy and speculative elements.
What drew you to that genre?
Pardon me?
What drew you into that genre?
It certainly isn't the only thing I like to read. I read everything, but I think it's the appeal of building a world that doesn't have to adhere to the rules of our world, I guess. And I've tried writing things before, but it always seems to take a hard left at some point.
And the title of your book is Suicide Stitch, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so Suicide Stitch, it says it's 11 short stories, and they're all one world? Are these different characters' perspectives? Is it kind of like a Love Actually thing? Or are they all one continuous narrative?
So it's about 8 years worth of short stories that I'd written. So they don't share worlds, they don't share characters. What connects them is that, in my view, they're all, in a way, love stories, concerning different kinds of relationships.
That's cool. Now, when you say short story, we've asked this question to other authors before. What is your approximate word count that you consider short story?
Most of my short stories come in at about 3,500 words. I find it really hard to write a short story that's longer than 5,000 words. It's sort of, it's got to be shorter than that, or it's heading into novella territory.
Okay. See, and every author's had a slightly different answer. Some people say up to 10,000 words. Some people consider anything under 5 flash fiction. So it's really interesting to see how each author looks at it.
Anything under 5,000 words is flash fiction?
I've heard it before, so
That person
like I
always
say, it's good to see what every author says.
because just going by market guidelines, short stories are almost always considered somewhere between 1,500 words, 5,000 words.
And that's a very unique challenge to take on consistently. Like you have a whole collection of short stories. Why not create one longer narrative? Like, I mean, that's such a unique approach.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think because I wasn't looking to put together a collection. It's just as a writer, that's what you do. You write short stories and you start trying to sell them, trying to get publishing credits and build a CV. So, you know, the more years go by, you sort of amass this pile of stories, and about half of them in the collection had been published before, and about half of them were unpublished pieces.
That's a hard skill to master, writing the shorter fiction. I mean, you really have to pick and choose the right words because you don't have a long time to really develop the story. You have to get it out there and make it perfect within that small amount of space.
Well, and you're demanding, short stories demand a lot more of the reader, I think. You're asking a reader to make bigger leaps with you than they would have to if it was a novel, because you don't have the space to fill in those gaps. So you're really asking a lot of a reader to come with you on a short story. And that's what I love about reading them too. Short stories in terms of emotional impact and resonance, you know, almost always are more powerful than novels for me in my reading experience.
Yeah, I gotta say, I mean, you gotta hook your reader right away. You gotta get them to really understand, you know, your world, your story setup, and then the payoff really quickly. I mean, it sounds as though you could sort of read your entire, well, I don't know how long the whole book is, but it seems like something that you could read in like one afternoon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that in a good way.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really interesting. I want to check it out.
Novels require you to have a certain amount of tenacity and endurance. But in terms of the technical skill and craft of writing short story really puts you to the test.
And I think the bite-sized stories too kind of appeal to today's society. Everyone wants everything quick and easy. They don't want to take the time to really sit down and do things.
And why aren't they reading more short stories? I work in a bookstore and we sell very, very few short story collections. People don't want to read them. They want a novel. And it seems counterintuitive because we do live in, you know, a society of digital media where anything longer than 500 words is almost like, oh, this is long form, right? So yeah, you'd think that people would be more into reading short stories, but it seems like only writers read them.
I wonder if that's more of an ebook thing than a print book thing.
Maybe, I don't know. Although the really cool thing is with the advent of digital books, ebooks, the novella is coming back because you can just release it as its own thing. It doesn't have to be part of a collection. So that's one really cool thing. I'm really excited about the comeback of the novella.
And what's really interesting is you get a sense of satisfaction once you do complete, you know, once you finish reading a book or a novel or anything, like there's always a sense of accomplishment. I'm wondering, as I go through your book, will I feel like, okay, good, I've done it once. Okay, good, I've beaten 3 stories. You know what I mean? Like a boss.
It's always a game with you.
Sorry.
I like to think I'm not demanding that much.
No. It's good though. It feels like, you know, you feel rewarded for putting in the time for reading a story, and so I feel like I'm wondering if I'm going to get that sense of gratification like 11 times for reading these stories.
You get your accomplishment badge.
Yes.
Achievement unlocked.
Yeah.
Sorry, had to play into the whole gamer thing.
Of course. So of these 11 stories, can you tell me which one is your favorite, and can you also give us kind of an overview of that story?
Oh, picking favorites is like picking a favorite kid. Like you always have one, but you don't tell them, right? I don't know. It sort of changes. Like most times I'm just so sick of all of them because I've worked on each one for so long. I just wouldn't care if I never ever saw them again. But Suicide Stitch, the title story, is probably my favorite. It was a very difficult story for me to write. It's about sisters, and I have a sister and we're very close, and it was a bizarre experience because in that story, one sister is clearing out the other's home after she's died suddenly in a car accident. And when I tried to think of put myself into that character's headspace, like how would I feel if I suddenly lost my sister? My brain just would not go there, just shut me down. So I had to take many runs at that story. And until finally I'm like, okay, that's what the character is going through right now. She cannot accept it. She cannot imagine a world where she's there and her sister isn't. And then the story started to come.
Isn't it so strange? It's like when you start developing a story and you do really have to get into that character's head, sometimes it feels like a physical burden as well as a mental burden.
When you're done, because you're just completely drained.
Yes, absolutely. That's one of the most rewarding parts of writing is you really have to get into their head. And it's sometimes it is really painful.
Yeah.
Sometimes you do draw on personal experiences and stuff. And I mean, you said, it was really tricky to write because every time that you approached it, you're like, no.
Yeah.
Your mind was telling you, no, this is pain that I don't want to deal with. And to actually have an authentic bringing, have to make the story feel authentic, like you have to face that. It's so bizarre, and it's such a weird relationship, like your work as the author, your work with your relationship with your work as the writer. It's weird.
Right. Yeah, and just being willing to let it take you where it wants to go instead of where you want it to go.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
A story that behaves perfectly as you're writing it is probably not a very good story.
No, you have to question it. You have to question your story's intentions and be like, hey, I'm watching you.
Yeah, exactly.
See, that makes me bring back the pantser versus plotter approach. I don't understand how plotters can do it because the story organically shifts and changes as you write it. And if you've got a hard outline plot, you're kind of stuck. From my perspective, I just don't understand it. It doesn't compute to me.
Yeah. Well, I think when you're writing a rough draft, you maybe have a couple ideas of, I know at some point this might happen, and I think it might end here. But you can't be too attached to that. Otherwise, you might miss all these amazing side trips. And maybe you thought your story was here, but really it's over there. And so if you write this exhaustive outline ahead of time, and I know writers who do this and they write good books, but I just couldn't do that. I would be so scared that I'm missing something wonderful by following a path that I've laid out for myself.
Exactly.
It's not exciting, right? I've tried outlining things, and by the time I'm done that, I have no energy or enthusiasm to write the story. So for rough drafts, I am a pantser all the way. It's also how I get to know my characters. I don't know them well enough when I start to know what they'll do and what direction they're going to steer the story in. It's only when I'm kind of into second and third drafts that I think, okay, I can start planning a little more carefully because I feel like I know these people well enough that I can put these details in.
And then my follow-up for that is, how can you create these mini worlds and then let them go? Like, once I've invested so much time into a story, like I know these people. I want to explore their world further. How can you sort of detach yourself from that and let them go off and not want to pursue other stories with them? Or is that something that you might do down the line?
don't know, maybe like never say never, but for me, when especially with short stories, it's never its own little world. Like they're usually just sort of segments of a person's life lifted out. They're people with stories that started before the story begins and continue after. So I think about them and what they might be doing now, but I don't feel like a sense of difficulty letting them go.
Okay, so can you give me like a period of time that one of your stories takes place in? Is it an afternoon? Is it an evening? Is it a week of their life? What is the shortest period of time in one of your stories, and what is the longest period of time that we see in your stories?
The shortest period of time is probably the story Why, which is a flash fiction piece, and it just takes place over the course of an evening of a young woman who works in a mortuary and takes her work home with her. So that's like over the course of an evening. And obviously that character, like this is not the first time she's brought her work home with her. So she has a whole life before, and obviously something more is going to happen to her down the road, but that's just, Tuesday night for this character. One of the longer pieces is 5 Day Forecast, which takes place over the course of 5 days. And each day is a segment of the story, and two characters build a relationship over the course of those 5 days. But again, they had lives before the story began, and they have lives that continue when it ends.
You've got me really curious, because you said each one of your stories has a love element, and you've got a mortician who takes her work home. The mind is going right now.
I find that story like one of the more romantic ones. Like,
now, is she bringing home a piece of her work, like an arm, or is she bringing home a whole corpse?
Well, you can read it and find out.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to. You've sold us on that one.
But it is truly a love story. It's actually a very sad story, because it's her looking for something in her work that she had for real and lost.
That's a very intriguing approach. It's funny because my older sister, was talking about working at a graveyard and basically accepting bodies.
Yeah.
And so I mean, I know that she would love this story already, just because of the theme and the setting.
Oh, excellent.
I'm going to recommend that one to her right away. So
I used to know a woman who did worked for a funeral home doing, she was a cosmetician, so she did makeup on the deceased. And she would just always tell me about her work and, little tricks she had for making them look alive. And, it's like, you're not fooling anyone. Everyone knows. But she really cared. Like, that was what touched me, is that the depth of her feeling for the people she was working on.
Well, that's their last impression of their loved one. That's the last time they're going to see them.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, they definitely want to make them look good. I mean, it's really creepy to talk about, but yeah.
No, yeah, and I was kind of creeped out when she would talk about it, but it was quite touching. Like, you don't this is a dead body. You don't have to care about this person. You're just doing your job. But she really did care.
And that's exactly why we need people who do that work to care.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's great. That's amazing.
We veered straight off topic now.
Yeah. To some small degree, but we do also have our good buddy Mickey here. So we got to go to him.
Hey, how's it going?
Long time no chat. Mickey, how you been?
I'm good, and I just wanted to say thanks for bringing me back on. A bit more special this episode is for me because Sarah was the second writer I ever signed. So she's been there right from the beginning. She's seen all the struggles and the successes and everything. She's just been like my poster child for Creative Edge. So this is a really truly special episode for me.
Oh, thank
But
you, Mick.
oh, for sure. But secondly, I also want to thank you guys too, because you've probably interviewed at least 3/4, and you've built Creative Edge up to where it is, and it's really all about collaboration. And you guys have just been so supportive. So anyone who ever wants to come to this show, they should, because it's a great experience.
Well, thank
thank
you
you,
very
Mickey,
much.
for sending us all the authors to talk to. It's been really wonderful meeting them. I'm sorry, I cut you off, David.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
I think we were just echoing the same thanks.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's great. I mean, and I'll just say for myself, we'll get back to Sarah in a second, I'm sure, because as you can tell, she's quite the interviewer and has a lot of discussion pieces. But for me lately, been going, I've probably signed since my last you guys, I've probably signed about 10 to 15 more authors, but I've also been doing like group interviews. And what I mean by that is I've reached more exposure in the United States, and of course where my roots are, but also the UK. And a lot of the reviewers, radio and things, they're now doing block interviews. And what I mean by that basically is instead of interviewing just someone like Sarah, they're now taking on blocks of people on a weekly or monthly basis. So here's an example of that. There's a radio station in Ontario, CJRU, out of Ryerson University. They've agreed to interview every single one of the writers that Creative Edge represents on a weekly basis until they're done. And it's just been phenomenal, because instead of getting only one person on, now we're getting 19, 20, 25 people. And all the genres are different and all the interview styles are different. And it's just a really, really effective way to market.
This is the power of the sorcerer.
That is really interesting. I've never heard of that before. That sounds like an amazing opportunity, and to be welcomed back consistently. I mean, it sounds like its own show.
Yeah, so I mean, even with CJRU, and they're only one example of I think about 6 that are doing this. But CJRU has decided to interview Creative Edge authors the entire year. So we're going to be getting 2nd, 3rd, 4th interviews for the same people. We're also going to be doing some group interviews with that. So we're going to be mixing up a United States writer with a Canadian writer to get different exposures and to get different markets involved in this. And that's only one aspect of what we're doing.
That's also going to get you different perspectives. One of my good writer friends is based out of Canada. His name is Benoit Chartier. And
yeah, you mentioned before, David. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have a completely different perspective than what he has. And so, I mean, mixing it up, Canada and the US, I think that's going to be such a great juxtaposition of the way the markets work and the way that you can get yourself out there. So that sounds incredible. Is there any way, like, do they have these interviews on a website, anywhere that we can link to? Because I'd like to check them out for my own personal, information, and also to share it.
Yeah, so what's basically happening is they're recording the interviews, they're then posting them live later, and then CJRU is going to be putting them onto a podcast, so they're all going to be accessible. And that's the beauty of radio. I found that not only college stations, but even mainstream stations, they're doing the interviews now, but then they're also putting everything onto podcasts, so they're always going to be accessible.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah,
I love
so
that.
that's what's going on with me, anyways. It's been a trip, and Sarah will attest, I'm hoping, but it's worked out very, very well with everything that's been going on.
Well, thank you so much for bringing us amazing talent. I mean, all of these authors that you've shown us, they're all amazing people. They're all full of knowledge, and I've enjoyed my time with every single one of them.
Thanks, David. And I'm not trying to sound cocky about this, but it probably will sound cocky. I've heard that from other media. I've had media write me and say You have one of the most wide variety of genres and talented people that we've ever seen from a publicity company. So I'm proud of that.
Well, it doesn't sound cocky at all. You put a lot of effort into your work and into finding these writers. I mean, so it's not any. It doesn't come as a surprise to me that you would have this really amazing roster.
It's all a team. That's all it is. It's
Must have.
collaboration and partnerships all across the board.
Well, thank you for helping us grow as well, because without your authors, we would have. I mean, we would still have amazing people, but we have your people.
And hopefully that'll continue, because like I'm signing more, and they're all great. So, but
The awesome thing about authors is everybody's a little bit different. Everybody's got a slightly different experience. So the more authors we meet, especially from all across the globe, the more perspectives we see, the more friends we make, that whole collaboration thing, it becomes a good networking angle for everybody. It just widens the community.
Definitely.
that's the plan. But yes, Sarah was my first writer in Calgary that I signed, second overall.
Yeah.
And she helped build this business up for me, basically.
Well, we kind of needed each other, I think. You were so good at just like, I don't care. The worst they can say to me is no. And so you were so good about just like reaching out and talking to everyone. And my joke is that I think I'm a pretty good writer, but I'm a terrible author, because I think of author as being the business part of things, and I'm horrible. I don't want to phone people and email people and ask to do things and set these things up. So, and it's really funny because that's my job. I'm an events manager at a bookstore. So, after doing that all day, I don't want to come home and do it for myself. And so having Mickey has been just like, he has been a miracle for me. I would not be where I am without him.
Oh,
Well,
thanks.
He does a lot of because like there's a certain detachment from representing other people's work as opposed to representing your own work. I feel as though, from my point of view at least, representing my work it's a little bit more vulnerable.
Yeah. Well, it's so easy. I could talk about other people's books forever.
Exactly.
No, a cat.
I know exactly where you're coming from. And so to have somebody like Mickey in your corner who just says, look, check this person out, check this person out, check this person out, it almost like, I mean, I would love to have that in my corner. So, because it removes you from the equation in a sense, but it keeps your work there. Like it's all about your work. It's not about, because I have a lot of issues with anxiety personally.
Like we're all just.
So it's like let me do my thing, and then you tell people about it. We're good. We're good.
Yeah, that's something you absolutely need in your corner. Most authors are introverts for the most part. They can talk to people, but maybe they're not so good at it.
Or it's
maybe
just
they have anxiety. Maybe they, they write well because they're able to edit themselves. They don't trip over their own tongue when they're in person, that kind of a thing. So to have somebody in your corner that can speak for you, that can introduce your work in a professional manner, that's an amazing thing to have.
Well, and to like on my own, I don't care how many books I sell. That's not really my area of concern. My area of concern is writing the best story, the best book I can. And then to have Mickey be like, okay, and this is how we're going to get your book out there and get people reading it. I really need that.
I think we all do, especially as independent authors, because we don't have the resources that a lot of traditional publishers do.
Mm-hmm.
So coming from somebody like a publicist like Mickey, your work sounds a lot more legitimate than if Mickey sends a letter to Barnes & Noble, for example, and says, I'm representing this author, you should check out their work and let's set up an event. That sounds a lot more legitimate than if I were to say, hi, I'm Dave Jones. Can I set up in your store? Because I'm like super cool.
You know what? You're yes and no. Dealing with publicists like Mickey is a dream. He makes it so easy. But most of the publicity agents I deal with in my work are a pain. They're just hanging out their shingle and calling themselves a publicist. They don't actually know what they're doing. They don't know how publishing works. They don't know how book selling works. It turns into this circuitous three-way communication between me, the publicist, and the author, just to set up something as simple as a signing, right? So, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is there are good publicists who are professional and know what they're doing, and then like Mickey, and then there's others that aren't. So having a publicist doesn't necessarily lend you, sort of a halo of legitimacy.
Right.
It has to be a good professional publicist.
That's so funny. I've never heard that before.
Well, it's only because I deal with them, right, in my job. So I know that not all publicists are created equal, for sure.
Thanks for saying that, Sarah. The one point I'll make from the Creative Edge group process is I probably signed, well, I don't even know how many I've signed, 29, 30 plus writers. And a lot of them, you have to say to them point blank, to get you media, it doesn't mean you're going to sell a ton of books out of that. A lot of writers have come and talked to me. They basically said, you're going to help me get rich. Well, I'm not going to help you get rich.
First of all, maybe try not being a writer if riches is your aim.
Exactly. But the second part of that is have the proper expectations. If you're releasing your first novel and it's not with a traditional publisher, it's going to probably take you 3 to 5 to 7 years to be successful. Now, we're going to be able to get you some media, not always promise, but try. And if we do get you some media, even if you go on, I don't know, Fox News or CTV Global the first time, it's not going to equate in sales the first couple of times. It's just not. But as you're building up media blocks, the more the sales should come at the end of the day. Sarah's a key point of that. I've done a lot of work with her this year. I mean, she's gone on numerous interviews. Right, Sarah?
Right.
Numerous interviews. And those interviews may not be equating to sales today.
Mm-hmm.
That block. And by the time her second or third book comes out, we should start to see a trend where the sales figures start to increase, just based on media exposure alone.
Well, exactly, because then you reach out to someone new, like a new media outlet, a new magazine, and they'll be like, oh, yeah, I've heard of this person. Or, oh, I've heard of Creative Edge, right? Like, so you get these positive associations, in the back of people's minds. And that's how you build your public persona.
Exactly.
I love the term that you just used, the positive associations. And the first time you hear a person's name, it's not going to impact you. The second time, not even then. It takes a few times and a lot of time to actually build up your career as an author. And so that's eventually, hopefully, going to snowball with your reputation. And so one of the coolest things that we heard was from Robert J. Sawyer. And he said to not measure yourself event to event. Measure yourself 3 years in, 4 years in, 5 years in, see where you're going. Mm-hmm. And don't beat yourself up after every event and be like, oh my gosh, I only sold 10 books at this signing. Panic, panic, panic. No. This is just one day in your...
Well, that's very wise advice, because as writers, we know everything takes forever. We're used to waiting. We're used to waiting. We know the value of patience. And that applies to building your career as well as, waiting to hear back on a submission.
Yeah, and for me, that was absolutely golden advice, because up until that point, you really do beat yourself up. You're like, well, I spent this much money to get here, and I only sold this much, and I came out negative. But that's a bad way to look at your career. Just gauge it over years, not on a week-to-week basis. Don't beat yourself up. And I think that was some of the most important advice that I've heard so far.
Yeah, and I mean, David, to that point as well. Sorry, Sarah, cut you off. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, you were talking. I wasn't going to say anything.
Oh, I was going to say, instead of, using someone like myself in that aspect, leverage the publicist. Publicists beat you up. Don't beat yourself up on a weekly basis. If you're only selling 5 books and I get those sales figures, I'm going to ask you why that is. What happened in this aspect? With the premise that hopefully you'll turn that 5 into 10 or 15. And Sarah knows this because I've done this to her.
Human that day.
What's that?
I said, I'm sorry, I forgot how to human.
Yeah. But I mean, let me do that. And that's part of my role, right? To follow and focus on those sales aspects. And as we're doing that, we'll get better as we're going along through this. The other thing that and I think Katie mentioned it, leveraging the publicist is an important piece. But I mean, there's some writers I'm still working with today, right now. They're not leveraging me to where they need to. I mean, they're still trying to do some of their own things. And there's a legitimacy thing there too. So for example, as I think you said it, Katie, if let's say, for example, Sarah went to a bookstore and tried to arrange a signing, or I went to a bookstore and tried to arrange that signing, it will, and I don't care what anybody says, it will give you more clout by me doing that for you. Guaranteed. And it's like that with anything.
They already know you and like working with you.
Yeah, that's right.
And by you, I mean you, Nikki.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean,
It does open up a lot of doors having somebody else talk about your work.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing with the online marketing. I can shout all day long about my books. Nobody's going to listen. But if a reader talks about my books, people will listen. Same thing with the publicist, having that professional person advancing, to a bookstore, to a convention and saying, hey, I've got somebody to represent. We'd like to get them here to do something, to either give a talk or, have a table, sell stuff. It does seem to open more doors than trying to do it yourself.
Well, on top of coming from a third party, on top of Mickey saying it instead of you or I or Sarah, that adds to the legitimacy of it. But on top of that, they all have working relationships.
Exactly.
So it's not like Mickey comes to this person for the first time. It's like, no, I've already brought you 5 other people. So let's talk about another event. Let's talk about this person now.
And then whoever you're working with, the media person or the bookstore, doesn't have to, they already know that Mickey knows how it works with them. And they can make sure and Mickey will make sure the author knows how it works. So it makes it easier for everybody.
To bridge everything. Yeah, definitely.
yeah, for sure. I mean, even with the CGRU thing where they're doing every single interview with every single writer, I mean, that would never have happened had someone like one of the writers reached out to that person. I don't think it would have, because they don't have the time to build that relationship, and they can't really speak to every other individual writer who's writing something. They just can't. They don't have the research to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't even have the personality to do it either.
Personality is a big thing too. We've talked about that before. The introvert versus extrovert is a serious thing. The anxiety thing, David, that's serious. Sometimes you just don't have the personality to sell yourself as well as you'd like to. So again, having somebody on your court who can help assist in that is definitely a benefit.
Right, Kate.
Sorry,
go ahead.
Go ahead,
No, you first. I cut you off.
I was going to say, it's also very exciting news to hear that they're interviewing authors in groups to begin with. I think that's an amazing opportunity just for the industry, period, that people are caring enough to book those authors.
Well, and I mean, it's all based on talent as well. And yes, I'm going to boost Sarah up in about a second here, so get ready for that, Sarah. But the fact of the matter is, Suicide Stitch, for a short story collection, was on the Calgary bestseller list for 5 weeks. 2 of those at number 1. For a short story collection in Alberta or in Canada, that just doesn't happen. It doesn't. So and that's the quality of people that I'm trying to attract. So for something like that, it's a lot easier to bring up those stats, talk to a media person, and then get an interview rather than just say, Suicide Stitch did this, this, and this.
Well, yeah,
Yep.
because if I come up and I'm like, I was the best seller, like I just sound like an asshole. But if you do it, it's a little more well received.
I'm glad somebody else said that. Thank you.
But I mean, that's all it is. And I am looking for pure talents that I can build on, right? I mean, signing someone like Robert J. Sawyer, and yes, he's still working with me, it's fantastic. I mean, he has a lot of accolades. I have others that don't have accolades, but because Robert's done so well in an interview with somebody, now we're getting opportunities for other people because of that.
It almost sounds a little bit like a mentorship program, and I mean that in the best possible way. In that, you have someone like Robert J. Sawyer, A-list Canadian author, but then that door can also lead to a path for somebody who is just looking to gain some traction in their career. That same contact, given the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Sarah's made this point to me before. She's basically said to me, and this is not a lie, Mickey, you should teach an interview. That should be part of your services, because we never want to book an author who's not going to be able to interview well for any show, including yours. Like, if I was to bring an author to you that interviewed horribly, number one, you're going to tell me about it, and number two, now you're going to be leery about whoever I bring on, right? Because there's a credibility aspect.
Well, so let's do this since we've got you here. We put you on the spot last time, Mickey. Let's do it again. Give us some general interview tips for authors.
Eye contact. Be confident about your books. Don't swear if you can help it.
Oops.
That's okay, Sarah.
Just I always swear. There will always be swearing.
No, and be able to forecast the type of questioning. I mean, also, some writers will reach out to the media and CC me after I've booked the initial what have you. But just be always, I mean, my thing is, and Sarah knows this, professional at all times. Always. And I have to be very careful about that, because you're not only representing yourself, you're also representing 29 or 30 other people that I'm in charge of.
Yeah.
And so if one thing goes bad, it's going to affect every single other person. And so I'm anal, and yeah, I know I'm anal, but I'm doing it for the right reasons.
Okay.
I've silenced the room. Look at that.
We got to process the information here. Now, what are some major no-nos in an interview?
Well, a lot of the interviews are to book reviewers and bloggers. And so they like to have written out interviews. They're going to send a template of interview questions over. The writer will fill them out and send them back, right? That's common practice. If there's a lot of grammatical errors within those interview pieces, you're not going to want to send it over to bloggers, because ultimately, and maybe I've ruined it now, but the general public are going to think that that blogger is the one that wrote all that out, when in actuality, it was the author that wrote it out. So as an author writing a book, if you have a ton of grammatical errors in an interview, probably not a good look for you. That's one piece. If I've said too much, I'm sorry, but maybe you'll edit that part out.
No.
No, we were just listening.
Well, one of our aims at Spilling Ink is to always inform our viewers, and the majority of people who view us are aspiring authors or authors of different levels who like to pick up new information. So interview tips is an excellent thing for them.
Yeah, and I think as well, like if you're talking with someone, say from CTV Calgary or CGRU or a station or something like that, these interviews are pre-recorded. Most of them are not done live, and there's a reason for that. But you do want to sound confident when you're talking about your books. If they're asking you how you got started, you don't want to have negative aspects. Everything should be positive from the beginning of the interview to the end of the interview. And then it's always constant follow-up as well. Now, if I was an author, I would probably be a lousy interviewer, because when I talk, I don't talk excited about stuff, except when I'm promoting people. But if I was doing an interview like I'm talking right now, I'm not sounding really, really excited about it. As an author, when you're talking about your book and your work, and this is going back to the sales process, you have to sound excited, whether you're being interviewed or whether you're talking to the general public trying to sell your novel. It's the same process.
Step one, lots and lots of caffeine before an interview.
Absolutely. Red Bull,
Oh,
Pep-
man. Yes.
coffee,
Red Bull.
whatever's going to get you pumped up.
Well, because you do have, the passion has to come through ultimately. Like,
Absolutely.
if you're not happy and excited and engaged talking about your work, I think you're in the wrong line of business. I think, what would be the point?
The tortured artist has sort of a long and romantic reputation, but in real life, no one wants to talk to that person because they are a drag and they're boring. Like,
Exactly.
even worse, they are boring. That is boring.
Exactly. So when you talk about your work, naturally, I think a lot of the passion, a lot of the excitement comes through anyway. So I don't think you really need to worry about that too much.
No, you don't.
I don't think anybody really needs to worry about that too much. But the grammatical errors in the interviews, that's something that I hadn't even worried about yet, strangely enough. So that's a really good tip.
Yeah, so I mean, when I get those kind of interview questions over, and I mean, for the senior people like Sarah or Robert or someone like that, I'm not going to preview what they wrote because they're better writers than I am. But if you have someone who's just putting out their first novel and they're still learning the ropes, I'm going to want to preview what they wrote before we send it over.
Right?
Because we want to make sure it's all professional, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think, from my point of view, I think I would feel more confident if I had somebody to share it with before I sent it off. So I think, from my point of view, I would be excited about that prospect.
Can I jump in on the written interview question?
Absolutely.
So I would say, and this is not because I'm an expert, it's just as a reader, the author interviews that interest me the most are where their responses are kept quite brief, like not terse, but not going on for paragraphs and paragraphs. I just kind of want like a few sentences, interesting, answering the question, and then moving on. Because I've seen author interviews where they're asked like a one-line question and their answer is like that.
Yep,
And I just
totally,
don't
Sarah.
read all that.
See, and that goes back to the whole single-serving society we've got, where the short stories should be doing much better because people do want short, snappy, and right to the point.
Yeah.
Keep it
My
simple.
husband always likes to do beginning, middle, and punchline if applicable.
Mhm.
And the last point I'll make around this, because as you said, your show is geared towards writers and advice and things like that. The last thing I will say is, if an author has a really, really good interview with a radio station or TV station or whatever, newspaper, and it's really, really good, they're going to be brought back every time they've got a new book coming out. Guaranteed. I've seen this multiple times with some of my clients, and some of my writers have had multiple interviews with the same media exposure. Book one, book two, other reasons, they're always brought back because they put on a dynamic interview.
That makes sense. Makes perfect sense.
So that's my advice.
All good things. I really like it. One of the most rewarding parts about doing Spilling Ink, for me personally, is learning. It's learning from everybody. It's learning, because my perspective is different from your perspective, which is different from Katie's perspective, which is different from Sarah's perspective. So as we interview these people, like, the most rewarding thing is to hear your stories. That's my favorite thing about doing the show, period.
Yeah. So on that note, I'm going to interject here, and I'm going to ask Sarah to tell you guys about the second book that's coming out.
Yeah, my first novel, second book, but first novel length work. It's called Infractus. It's being published by Driven Press. It's going to be out in September. It's a fantasy, near future fantasy with a few sci-fi elements. I don't like to say it's science fiction because though there are a few elements of that, it's not the focus of the story. I'm really excited. This has been a book that I've been working on for about 7 years. So I'm very excited to finally see it come out. And then hopefully there's a sequel to it that'll be out a year from then.
Is the sequel already written, or is it in the writing stage right now?
It's in a stage of draft work. So it's still got a ways to go, but it's getting there.
Okay. One of the things we do a lot on Spilling Ink is we work on our log lines. Do you have a log line for this one yet?
I do. It's, and of course, now that you asked me, it's not even in my head.
This is nervous down here, guys. That's what it is.
This is really good practice because that's getting the elevator pitch down is a really important skill.
A human assassin is recruited by the Archangel Michael to destroy an oppressive regime enslaving mankind.
Wow.
That's
all right. Very nice.
I should know it down pat. I've written it in like a dozen query letters.
I like
and
it.
I can even dissect that because it's so good.
That's excellent. Now, was it the query that got you to your publisher? How did you land this publisher?
Well, I had spent some time looking for an agent. Got a few nibbles, but no bites. And I just did a Duotrope search looking for publishers that took unsolicited manuscripts, and Driven Press was one that came up in that search. And so I actually knew a couple authors that had books published through them, actually their sister imprint, Bottom Drawer Publishing. And so I talked to them. I said, what are these guys like? And they had told me like they had great experiences, that the editing was thorough and professional, and that they did their promotion and they communicated well. And I kind of reevaluated, like, so what do I want? I want a publisher that believes in my work, is going to do a professional editing job, design, promotion. If someone can give me that, I'm going to go for it. So I queried them, and then they asked for the first 3 chapters, and then they asked for a full. And then they got back. The whole process took about 6 months before they finally offered me a contract.
Now, when did you say this was coming out?
Pardon me?
When did you say this was coming out?
September 2017.
Okay, so not long from now. Are you starting to work on the build up, the publicity? I can speak today. The publicity, the media, the blog tours. You starting to work on all of that?
Yeah, I've been sort of like talking about it a bit as I'm doing promotion for Suicide Stitch. I've got a few things happening. I'm going to hit it hard in September, though, taking the summer off. I desperately need some time off. But yeah, so that I'll be rested for when the book comes out.
That's always exciting when you've got a new book out.
It is, but it's also, I know how exhausting it's going to be because I've already done it with Suicide Stitch. So where it's like new and exciting, and, you know, this is still exciting, but it's not quite as new. I have this knowledge of how tired I'm going to be, but it's worth doing. It's very exciting. You know, you spend so much time alone in the dark in a little hole writing this book, and then finally it's out there for people to see.
I like that, alone in the dark writing. That sounds about right too.
It's very accurate. It's a very accurate description.
So yeah, Sarah's gonna be going hardcore because I'm going to make her. FYI, Sarah, you know that, right?
Yeah, we already talked about this.
Sarah's actually going to be on CTV Calgary in August, talking about the difference between traditional and self-published books, and that's when we'll start the process of building this book up. And then it's just going to be media frenzy, reaching out to everybody to try to get interviews and such.
Good. Congratulations. And you said that you've been working on this book for about 7 years?
That's right.
Wow, good. Congratulations. You finally finished it. That's so exciting.
Yeah, I have other books that I've finished that will remain in a drawer in the dark and forever. This one is the one that was good enough to put out there, though.
Well done. Good. So do you have your print proof yet or any of that? Have you helped?
Not quite. Almost. Any day.
That's like the best part is when you actually hold it in your hands. You're like, I did this.
Yes. Yeah. Very nice. Can't wait.
We need to make a meme out of that, David.
did it. I did it.
Right up there with achievement unlocked.
There you go.
So I'll be touching base with you guys in September to try and get Sarah back on.
Oh,
Awesome.
definitely.
Yeah, we'd love to have her back.
Maybe by then we could like get
There you go.
an advanced reader copy or something, so we could discuss it a little bit in more detail. Or something.
Yeah, as soon as I get it, I'll forward one to you guys. Well, I'll have Nikki do it for me.
Oh, that'd be so cool.
See?
I will.
See what I did there? There's the right answer, Sarah. Bonus points.
I love it. That's really cool.
All right. Well, it looks like we're actually coming up on time. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about before we run down the show?
No, I think I'm good. This has been fun. Thank you so much for having me.
You've been wonderful,
Thanks for
and
having me.
September, we'd love to have you back.
Fantastic. Definitely.
And Mickey, it's a pleasure as always. We love your tips too.
Thanks for having me on the show again, guys. You guys are phenomenal. Every writer should be on this show. That's my advice. Everyone.
There we go. I like that.
We love you too, Mickey.
And Sarah, it's
All
always
right.
lovely seeing you.
Yes.
What was that?
I was just telling Sarah, it's always good to see her.
Yes. We don't get to see each other as often as we'd like.
No.
All right. Well, I think that's it for this week. We're going to be offline for the next couple of weeks, David. Is that right?
Yeah, we got Phoenix coming up.
Yeah, so we'll be prepping for that, and we'll definitely be posting videos from Phoenix with our escapades out there. We plan to have a good time, and we'll be back next time with more authors to introduce you to and more topics to discuss. Thanks for watching. Bye, guys.
Bye.